Welcome to another episode of the Barron Report Live. This is the show that talks about all things innovation in restaurant and hospitality. Today we've got some great stories. I want to go right to our lead topic, which is Amazon Go, going even bigger. Now, Amazon Go, as you've probably seen some of our coverage here on the network, this is basically a cashier-less type of retail operation that started in Seattle and really kind of started to develop some new strategies around technology, consumer behavior, a ton of things. Wall Street Journal reported, though, that they're working on, being Amazon Go, are working on at least 3 different formats that are designed to challenge the grocery format. Now, this is something that I think is super important because especially when you look at the strategy that they're taking with Whole Foods, this could have a major impact on the restaurant space itself. So the Go format, I think, when you look at it as an overall format, one, of course, it relates to all the Prime members there on Amazon. But in addition, it has that integrated technology. So there's a lot of benefits that what this could be doing in terms of bringing retail trade to Amazon's format. So some of the things that we looked at was how Prime members behave. So a unique point on Prime members and how they interact with food brands are showing some significant penetration. And what that simply means is Amazon's Prime members are among the highest frequency diners when it comes to food influencers in the U.S., with over 5 visits on average to restaurants each month. So again, you're already showing that the propensity for Prime members to eat out is there. So this could have a major effect since you're changing the essentially the habits of Prime members with this new technology and potentially an Amazon Go format that would go into their stores like maybe Whole Foods. In addition, when you look at this same group of Prime members, they have over 10 conversations on food products around health and wellness each month, which is one of the highest in food conversations overall of all types. Now, why is this important? This is important because of Whole Foods' overarching strategy and how they go to market. The fact that they're owned by Amazon, the fact that Amazon Go could be integrated into that, and the fact that health and wellness food is being talked about so much. These guys could become the 800-pound gorilla in terms of the healthy halo category, which is a whole new factor of how these guys could go to market and compete with the restaurant industry on an ongoing basis. Another topic that hit the desk this week, of course, is our trade with China, which will resume and essentially could affect food in a very big way. And let's kind of talk about this and kind of the implications that what's going on right now with President Trump and President Xi is the tariffs. Let's go look back into July, where China basically responded to our tariffs in kind by introducing 545 more types of U.S. goods. Some items, such as pork, were slapped with 2 rounds of tariffs, meaning a tax on U.S. pork is now at 50%. The promise of stacked tariffs also makes it difficult for the determined price level of tariffs in many items. So it's difficult for us to even know how much tariff is actually happening. When you look at this trade war as it continued to escalate and as the U.S. implemented new rounds of tariffs, including the $200 billion worth on Chinese products, this really became a major factor. China announced it would retaliate by, of course, introducing an additional $60 billion in tariffs on American goods. Now, all this was taking place over the summer and then up through September 24th. It now appears, though, that the trade war will be a ceasefire for at least 90 days during a negotiation period between Trump and Xi. A quick list of items that could have an impact on the restaurant business if the 90-day tariff delay does not take effect. So as you can kind of see on screen right here, this is only a partial list that Eater covered, and kind of what we did was glean it out into the items that were pretty significant on restaurant menus. So these are all the producers across the country that are being affected by these Chinese tariffs. When you also look at our other neighbors, which is Canada, currently imposing tariffs on also a variety of food products. Here's another list. This list continues to pound the food industry in the restaurant industry. And then last is the tariffs based on Mexico as they retaliated to the aluminum import tariff by the U.S. So There is a lot going on right now as it pertains to this negotiation. Obviously, if Trump and Xi come to an agreement, this could release a lot of pressure on the agricultural and farming communities, and hence the suppliers of our industry could also be impacted in a good way. And of course, we've seen some movement in the stock, the New York Stock Exchange, as we've seen kind of impending on whether or not these tariffs would hold throughout the 90 days. Not a lot has been reported since this was announced this week, so we'll continue to keep an eye on this as we go forward. All right, so covering on our third topic today, I've got a gentleman that is a part-time contributor here on Third and the restaurant coach joining me via Skype today. It is Donald Burns. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. I'm so happy to be here today. I wish I was in your weather, though. I mean, Albuquerque is a little cold, so.
A little chilly. Well, we're at that time of the year, end of year wrapping up, which is kind of the rush towards everything from trends and prediction shows, and a lot of the news cycle kind of picks up a little bit right before the holidays as well. Donald, so for some of our listeners and viewers, you guys do marketing and leadership development consulting there. Anything that you're seeing in the market space right now that might be kind of top of mind trends wise that you've kind of picked up on?
Well, of course, and I know you mentioned it on a lot of the Barron reports, the kind of switch to how do we, basically make our restaurant or our concept more flexible, to meet the demands of the market. And that kind of concept, that flex casual thing, I've really seen that coming into play where people at lunchtime are more fast casual, counter service, quick pickup, let's move these things along. And then actually at night, they kind of flip the switch and they kind of go a little more of a full service kind of concept with, with service teams on the floor and stuff like that. And that's really seems to be something I see a lot more as far as across the country, because, I'm lucky that I get to travel all around the world and stuff like that. And that's something I've really seen kind of starting to heat up a little bit.
Yeah. Well, fast casual obviously has been an evolution that is going on strong for almost 2 decades now. And I do think you're right with, these flex and some concepts we've seen in at the upper level of casual dining, and then having, like a small counter, almost like the pickup counter or the to-go counter that they convert to a fast casual version of their order taking. So that's interesting that you're seeing more and more of that. So the topic today we're going to be covering is the 5 psychological principles that you can use to get a better restaurant. So this is going to be fun, I think, in kind of understanding what, as an operator, because these are some of the issues, people challenges are probably the biggest challenge of operators worldwide. Your thoughts on kind of the current state of the restaurant industry when it comes to employment right now? Is it good? Is it bad? How are things flowing out there?
Well, everyone says, there's a war for talent.
Yeah.
I've never been a big believer in the war for talent. I think there's a war with talent because we've alienated people so much, and I hate to say it, we've done to ourselves with a lot of stereotypical kind of behavior that we've treated employees. We haven't treated them, we haven't treated them like humans. And, we, push these people to long hours. We pay them, kind of minimum wage at the most. And then we expect them to perform at these high levels of performance. And then when they don't deliver, we just treat them badly. And I think the thing that all operators need to do, start moving in the future, is we have to look at, number one, how we treat ourselves as far as respect and how we're treating our team with respect. And then how can we attract better talent? And I tell people all the time, if you have a problem hiring in this market, because there's actually, a lot of great people out there, it's basically because your culture is not attracting talent to come work for you. So
yeah, I would say you're right there. I'm kind of curious when you look at the scope of, because I hear this from operators quite a bit, is that trying to find the A player, which usually is a performer of 1, 2, 3 times that of an average, or maybe a C or a D player, which is usually just a person to fill the position. When you have that kind of mentality, does it also put your organization in a framework that you just have less of those A players doing more of that work more easily with a tighter culture? Is that kind of some of the things that you see that seem to work out there?
Yeah, definitely. A players do outperform and do have more output than a C player. And here's a typical example is like, somebody's paying, let's just say $12 an hour for a C player. So
Okay.
I need 2 C players to basically make up for an A player. So 2 C players at $12 an hour, it's $24 an hour, where I could get an A player at $18, $19 an hour who would actually do the work of 2 people. I'm paying them a decent wage, but when you talk to owners about, hey, you should pay these people $19 an hour. Oh, $19 an hour, I can't afford that. It's like, well, do the math. You're paying a lot of money right now for 8, 9 guys in your kitchen that are putting out average stuff. If you could eliminate 3 guys in a line, pay those other guys higher wages, number one, they're going to stick around because now they're making the money they need to, and also too, A players like to play with A players. They hate playing with C players because they just bring them down. I hate to say it, but they just like lower the energy and the motivation of the team, because C players, A player has to pick up the slack. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm seeing that in operations. Sometimes I'll recognize it just when you walk in from the hostess or the maitre d' stand, where you immediately know you're dealing with a different level and quality of personnel. Speaking of that, let's get into the psychological principles of how you can use kind of this approach to get a better restaurant. Number one, you've got 5 topics here that you were kind enough to kind of give us a precursor to. The habit loop. Let's talk a little bit about that. What exactly is the habit loop?
Well, let's see. The habit loop is basically you are basically a product or a byproduct of your habits, good and bad. And the thing is, habits are kind of like, and you used to work for Microsoft, like habits are like an old operating system on a computer. It's like running in the background all the time. And the problem is, if we don't upgrade it while getting rid of that old program, like, when you upgrade to a new software, a new version of your iOS on your phone, you got to get rid of that old one, or else it just keeps running in the background. It actually starts bogging things down, slowing things down. So habits are the same thing. You've got some habits that you basically have that you're probably not aware of because they've become a habit. And habits are basically, there's like a formula for habits. And it's usually a trigger, or what they call the cue. And after the cue, it basically kind of goes into the desire. And then after that, it's the action or response. And then it's usually the result. So for an instance, let's say something as easy as coffee. Getting up in the morning, people have to have that cup of coffee. The alarm goes off. That's the trigger. Your desire is, I got to get up. I don't want to get up. But then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I need coffee. So you automatically get up and head for that coffee. And you drink the coffee, and now you feel like, I'm awake. Now, is coffee really doing it? Probably not. But you've developed this habit for it. And so, I used to be really bad on coffee, too, in the morning. And so what I did is, if you want to change habits, you want to break the habit loop and the pattern, you have to interrupt it. Now, a lot of people think, I'm just going to stop drinking coffee. Okay, that's not really smart, because, number one, anytime you take out a habit, something has to fill in the void.
Right.
So, instead of drinking coffee, now I start going to, I'm going to Krispy Kreme in the morning, and I'm not drinking coffee in the morning, but I'm having a donut on my way to work, to the restaurant. That's not a good habit to replace it with. So what I've done is, you got to replace the negative habit with a positive impact. So I have a rebounder trampoline in my house. So now in the morning when I get up, alarm gets up, now alarm goes off. Now my desire to get up. First thing I do before I start thinking about it too much is I get up, throw some sweats on, and I go and I rebound for like 5 minutes to get my blood going.
Okay.
And it actually gets my blood going, gets me pumped up. And I find that I'm not reaching for that 1, 2, 3, 4 cups of coffee in the morning like I used to. So.
Right. Yeah. So as a habit loop, because this is something that have found seems to work with both staff and team members, do you introduce just basically a kind of new ways to do something, so they've kind of stuck in themselves? Maybe you interject new ideas or say, hey, let's change this up. Change is a good thing. Is that something that you recommend to your clients?
Yes, change is always, change is change. And here's kind of a joke I always tell people about change. The funny thing about change is that change does not want to change. It's kind of like,
in itself.
Yeah, in itself it doesn't. You have to push change along. So when we see people doing stuff at the restaurant that are habits, always like, doing this and that, we have to break the habit. One of the typical ones I see is like bussers who walk out to grab glasses and they stick their fingers in there.
Inside the
Yeah.
glass. Yeah.
I mean, that's a great way to get hepatitis, So,
Yep.
So how do we break the habit? Is like, we teach them instead of like grabbing those things like that, making an extra trip, making sure that they're safe, and instilling a new habit about scooping the glasses up and grabbing
Sure.
them, instead of like putting the fingers in there. It's not making it easy for them. So.
Yeah. Well, I think consumers now are so much more aware of just what's happening inside a restaurant. So you've got, everything's kind of a show today when it gets out there. Number 2, identity. That seems kind of obvious, but you have a little different spin on this. Let's talk a little bit about that.
See, identity is basically who you think you are. And here's the thing about identity is it's really powerful in understanding kind of your motives and your actions. And I'll use the example of this as from a political standpoint. All right. Republican or Democrat. You're not really one or the other. You choose the identity of which you associate with, and then you become the identity. And then you actually, like, if you take on if you identify as a Republican, you have certain kind of things you believe in, you support, you act in a certain manner. Same thing if you say you're a Democrat. There's certain things you believe in and stuff like that. The one I use for restaurants is manager or leader, and look at the identity. So a manager, to me, if you look at what a manager does, and look at just the first part of the word manager, manage, and if I look at the word leader, lead. So if I identify myself as a manager, basically I'm managing the team, I'm managing the day-to-day, I'm managing the fires, I'm managing the chaos, I'm going around putting out fires, stuff like that. Where if I'm a leader, and if I identify as a leader, I'm actually leading the vision, I'm leading the team, I'm setting the example. So there's a powerful way of how you identify yourself and your title, and how you identify your restaurant in the market too. Well, we're just a greasy mom and a greasy spoon place.
Yeah, sure. The expectations are not there necessarily. Sure.
Exactly.
Do you find that is a difficult challenge for operators to kind of embrace? Is to really understand who they are and then convey that out to their customers?
Yeah, and that goes back to like just basic branding. Who are you? Who do you believe you are? What do you stand for? What are your core values? And how do you identify with that? I just recently did like a rebranding kind of exercise and one of those identity things with a client in Bogota, Colombia. And that was the thing. He had gotten off track about who he really was. And then once he got solidified about who he was and what he stood for, it was really like crystal clear. It was like that light popped on his head and he's like, oh my God.
Sure.
And now he's got his whole team back in, kind of back into the fold. Everyone's kind of reinvigorated. Everyone's back into the vision. Everyone's bought into the concept, and they're really moving forward now.
I like it. Your number 3 topic, cognitive biases.
Oh yeah.
So it's just basically, you're getting so much information. How do you digest this? What's the feedback on this?
So cognitive biases, I would say you should be aware of how people process information. If you understand, again, one of my things I love to tell people is awareness precedes choice and choice precedes change. One of the things we have is, or one of the biases, there's quite a few of them. I think there's like 90 of them total. But one of the ones I usually recommend that people understand in restaurants is cognitive, or basically confirmation bias is the biggest one. Confirmation bias is, this thing is that when we have a belief, we tend to look for evidence that supports it. I'll give you an example. So I come to your restaurant. I've been on the road. First thing I do when I come to a restaurant, I have to go to the restroom. I go in the restroom. Restroom's just trashed. Paper towels all over the place. The place is a mess. So what's my belief? Well, the restroom's trashed. I bet you the kitchen's dirty too. So now I come out and now I'm looking for information that supports my belief, my claim. I'm looking at confirmation. So I walk up to the hostess and she's like, on her phone, she's texting or not even looking at me, or she greets me by number, just one. I'm like, see, these people don't care. And I go out in the dining room, I sit down, the ketchup at the table, the ketchup bottle's all messy and has, ketchup, residue ketchup on it. So I'm like, oh yeah, this place is disgusting. Now I'm not even really giving you a chance to try your food or your drink. But now you've already got so many strikes against you because of my confirmation bias. I'm looking for evidence that's going to support my belief.
So the idea behind that, in terms of getting your staff or your team to kind of understand this,
Mhm.
what are some tips that you would say, hey, these kind of things are happening in our restaurant on a day in, day out
Right.
basis? What are some of the things that they would be able to recognize to understand that?
Just understand that the devil is in the details, and that
Yeah.
there's no really in a restaurant industry, like you said, people are a lot more attuned to what's going on in restaurants. They are looking for everything. Richard Millman at Let Us Entertain You has a great thing he does when he opens up a new restaurant. He sits in the seat of every seat in his restaurant. He'll sit in every chair just because he wants to see what the line of sight is that every
Yeah.
guest is going to look through. And that's a
Yeah.
great thing to do. Walk through, do your walkthroughs. I mean, I know it's boring. Oh, do I have to walk to parking lots? Do I have to walk to restrooms? Do I have to walk? Yes, you do. Just that's part of the whole thing. Make sure every
Yeah.
part of the experience is checked off.
All right. So, Donald, let's go into number 4 here, locus of control. Tell me a little bit about that and your whole mindset behind it.
This one really, I kind of look at this one as, it's more what I call the locus of control. Locus of control is basically, do you have an internal or external kind of frame of reference on control?
Right.
So internal locus of control is basically, I know I'm the master of my own destiny. I am responsible for my actions. I know that what I do has an impact on my staff. An external locus of control is I'm basically a victim. Just life happens to me. Things just happen to me. Oh, it's not my fault. The market's just slow. Oh, there's no good help out there.
Right.
These kind of things are really that locus of control. I can usually tell right away from interviewing an owner or a manager or a leader where their locus of control is, if it's internal or external, just by some of the phrases they say. Oh, just I can't find any good help. Oh, the market sucks.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what are you doing about it? Well, nothing I can do. It's just the market sucks. No, there's a lot of things you can do. You can look at your marketing. We can look at your menu. We can look at your brand. We can look at your, what's your brand message? What's your menu saying? I mean, there's a lot of things you can do. So,
Yeah, and I've seen this so much with the industry. Sometimes they just don't put it out there in the sense of, it's like, hey, I'm just going through the motions because this is what I have to do.
right.
The market is as it is. And oftentimes what I find is it's like, well, have you challenged, the method or the model that you're currently in to try to expand it and move it to the next level? Because that could open up a whole new set of horizons for you just by letting loose a little bit of that that focus that you've got on one particular attitude towards your business.
And people,
All right, so
and people like they just like kind of like like they're waiting for permission from you to say it's
exactly,
okay to
yeah,
challenge. You're like, really? And you're like, yeah. It's like, wow, okay.
I love it. Motivation is your number 5
Oh,
psychological principle. I think motivation is one of those that just people overlook because it's kind of inherent in most companies or in organizations, or at least they think it is. Your thoughts on how to improve motivation
well,
to get your restaurant on track?
the biggest thing you always hear, like leaders, you got to motivate your team. You got to motivate your staff. You got to get out there and motivate them, motivate them, motivate them. Well, the problem is that most of the time we're not really motivating. We're out there just pushing people. And again, to me, that's the difference between a manager and a leader. A manager is push, where leadership is pull. And the biggest thing you got to understand is that most people people never are motivated by your reasons. They're motivated by their own reasons. And that goes to 2 words I like to throw out: compliance or commitment. So most people are in compliance. They're going to do what they need to do to keep their job. And that's compliance. You tell the hostess to smile. She'll smile when you walk by. Okay, thanks. Then she's back on her phone, texting her friends.
Yep.
That's compliance. Commitment is when they buy into their own reasons. And the biggest thing I tell people is you got to have some conversations with your staff, find out what motivates them. Because just like locus of control, motivation is either internal or external. Internal motivation is I do it for my reasons, and I'm connected to this vision. I bought into it. And that also goes to selection when you're hiring people, is that I need to interview people and I need to hire people that connect with who my brand is, what my values are, what our vision is, what our mission is, and that people can get behind that and say, you know what, this is something I really believe in. This is a brand I believe in. And that's how you get, you go from compliance to commitment. When people are bought in to what your vision is and what your core values are, and they can resonate with those, and then they become, basically, you've seen it before, they become brand advocates. They go out of their way to talk about your brand.
Yeah. Anything that operators could do to help themselves, especially in the hiring process, for being able to identify someone who has that more of a commitment, versus a compliance type mindset? Anything that you would say, hey, watch out for these particular signals?
I'll give you my favorite interview question. How's that?
Okay.
My favorite interview question. I ask people this in interviews all the time. It's like, do you respect yourself? And of course, everyone's going to say, yeah, I respect myself. But then the second part of that question is, give me some examples of how you respect yourself. Yeah. So what I'm looking for is ways that people actually go out of their way to respect themselves. I take care of myself. I work out in the morning. I watch what I eat. I set strong boundaries in my relationships. I make sure my kids are in bed at a certain time, so I can have some time with my spouse. I mean, those are things that show me that these people respect themselves, because if they don't respect themselves, trust me, they're not going to respect you. They're not going to respect your property. They're not going to respect your brand. They're not going to respect your guests. So,
yeah. I think that's a very good point, and I love that approach too, because I think, when you look at planning for 2019, of building, the next, level of most restaurants, as they're looking at their staffing situation, they're trying to figure out how am I going to grow? If I am going to grow, who am I going to grow with? So really understanding these psychological principles, I think, is paramount in trying to build a great team for your restaurant business.
Definitely.
Donald's been great having you on the show today.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for stopping in. And you've got a new book coming out. Tell us a little bit about it. What's going to happen?
Yeah, well, my first book came out last year, and it's, Your Restaurant Sucks. And it's been great, a probably bigger response than I ever anticipated. So I'm doing a follow-up book. It's coming out probably end of the year, 1st of January. And it's basically a continuation. So the second book is called Your Restaurant Still Sucks.
Okay, I love that title. Donald, it's been great having you. Thanks
Thank
again
you, Paul.
for
Appreciate
stopping in on the Barron Report.
Thank you so much.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and go to our next story, which is actually a breaking news story from TechCrunch today on Uber Eats. And basically what they're doing is adding promoted placements. And essentially what Uber Eats is doing is they're adding a promoted placement function within the app. It's being tested in India. And essentially the way I understand it is they're going to take restaurants and give them the ability to promote certain types of bundles or deals on their app. Now, this is going to continue to be an interesting thing to follow, because if you look at Uber as an overall strategy for restaurants, the 30% surcharge to restaurants as their take, and then the fees that it goes in the app to the consumer, I still feel like Uber is really taking advantage of the restaurant business, and this I feel like is going to be a further slice into restaurant profits if this becomes something major. Obviously, this will be a catalyst, I think, in how consumers behave with the app, meaning they're probably going to utilize it even more. Certain restaurants that are trying to get off the ground are probably going to have to kind of sell their soul to the devil with Uber Eats and how this might work. So we'll continue to kind of keep an eye on this breaking story, especially if they put this app feature live here in the U.S. for restaurants and consumers from a standpoint. So as you know, we try to do the Barron Report live here. We have guests on sometimes each week. We bring up topics that are breaking news items. If you have an idea for a story or you have a guest that you'd like to see here on the show, make sure and just drop us a line. You can reach us at producer@foodabletv.com. If you're catching this live on one of our broadcast feeds now, great. But if you want to catch this on demand, you can do so, of course, over on iTunes and on Spotify. So make sure and check us out there. We'll catch you next week right here on the Barron Report.